What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the Canadian Football Fanatic YouTube channel. Thank you guys for tuning in tonight, and you guys are tuning in to another BC Lions preview show. Week 15 is upon us. Tomorrow night, it kicks off with the BC Lions taking on the Toronto Argonauts back at BC Place for the first time in some time. I believe I heard, I believe it was 6 of 7. Coach Campbell said 6 of 7, 6 of the past 7 weeks, the BC Lions have not played in BC Place. Obviously, the last time they had a home game was Touchdown Pacific. So, although it was a road trip, it was away from home, not in BC Place. So, it should be good to get them back in BC Place. They play very well. No conditions, having any implications on the game. And if I'm not mistaken, as well, I believe they have I think it's 3 or maybe 4 of their last home games down the stretch here are home games. 3 or 4 of their last remaining games, excuse me, are at home. So before we get into it, I'd appreciate it if you guys could like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Be a friend, tell a friend about us, please, especially on Instagram, on Twitter as well. Twitter, we're trying to build our following. Instagram, we are closing in on 1,000 followers. So it'd be awesome to let's set maybe a goal here, like by end of the weekend type thing. It would be awesome to get some. I believe we need like less than 15 followers to reach our goal. So it'd be awesome. Please, like I said, be a friend, tell a friend, as Pat McAfee likes to say. And as you can see, I guess, guys, won't be here too long. Thursday night, so Thursday night football here tonight. My Buffalo Bills taking on the Miami Dolphins down there in South Beach. Should be a good one. Really excited for that one. So should be around for maybe 40 or so minutes. Blake should be joining me here shortly, just heading home from work. So yeah, Blake and I will be chat about the game for maybe no longer than 40 minutes is, I guess, what I'll say. Go over offense, defense, how we're feeling versus the matchup versus Toronto and their respective units. Depth charts, injuries, stuff like that. There was some injury news as well today for the BC Lions. And speaking of injury news, I guess this is a BC Lions preview show. That being said, though, folks, had the really unfortunate news today that Tyson Philpott has been, I believe, ruled out for the rest of the year. I don't know. He was placed in the 6th game. There was no other kind of moves made up until the announcement here today. So we're not sure. I'm actually unsure what kind of the final injury is. And it's just unfortunate because he was having a hell of a season and, just building off that Grey Cup last year and the most outstanding Canadian in the Grey Cup was really unfortunate because I think he's a big piece for Montreal. That being said, enough about the Montreal Alouettes. Let's talk about the BC Lions. Let's get into depth charts more specifically, okay? We had pretty good news for in that aspect in terms of depth charts for the BC Lions this week. Outside of the notables who are already out of the lineup, Ben Hladek, who's dealing with this calf injury, who AC Lee's been in the lineup for the last 3 or 4 weeks now, if I'm not mistaken. Guys are kind of getting healthy on the BC Lions. We did have the news today that David Mackey will not be playing in the game tomorrow night. And I think that is, a fairly significant loss for the BC Lions. He's obviously become a very valuable short yardage quarterback for the Lions the last 6 or 7 weeks here. And I think I'm interested to see. I'm guessing it's going to be Nathan, but do they maybe put out Vernon Adams in some sort of capacity with some packages prepared for him where he could maybe it's a second and short, 2nd and 1 type situation where you have that 3rd and 1 situation to fall back on. So maybe you go to play action or something like that with having a guy like Vernon Adams as your backup / potential short yardage quarterback. So I am interested to see how the Lions handle that one and hope that nothing bad comes of it, because obviously with Nathan or Vernon, whoever is going to have to take it, comes with some extra hits. Hopefully they're able to just get down. Hopefully maybe they're able to look like last week and score touchdowns. But that being said, it is a fairly significant loss. Although fullback in the CFL, a lot of people would probably scoff at mentioning that as a loss to the Lions, but four-phase special teamer, captain on the Lions. Believe he's been here for I want to say 5 or 6 seasons now. Kind of really a pillar in the locker room, I would say, in the BC Lions locker room, and he will be missed. But from what we're hearing, nothing too serious going into the bye week as well. I would expect to see David Mackey back in the lineup on the other side of the bye after the matchup versus Toronto tomorrow. So offensively, talking about some more injuries, Darrell Broxton obviously has been placed on the 6-game injured list, and super actually nice to see. Not too sure if we can call him friend of the program quite yet, but Chris Slugger, who we've kind of built somewhat of a little bit of a relationship with, big fan of him more so than anything, honestly. That got so he began the year as a reserve offensive lineman, got thrust into some action there. I believe week 2, week 3, when the offensive line started to get banged up, and it had been playing very well, and it was a big part of why the Lions were so successful there early offensively. Ends up getting a little bit banged up. I believe spent some time on the 6-game injured list. His time is now up. He's eligible to come back, and he's going to come back and actually move out to the left tackle spot. So we had David Neville start there the last few weeks after Jarrell Broxton's injury down in Touchdown Pacific. And David Neville, although he got off to a solid start, I guess is probably a fair way to put it. He's kind of come back down to earth a little bit in the last few games, and just nothing, not something, excuse me, you want Nathan depending on that blind side of the offensive line. So Chris Slugger, not too sure, not having too much familiarity with him outside of this season coming over from Montreal. If he has some experience, I would imagine most offensive linemen have a little bit of flex, whether that's interior offensive linemen to be able to play that center guard, or guards tackles being able to get outside as well. So should be interesting to see what kind of comes of this, because once he comes back, Darrell's going to obviously get his spot. But I think this is also somewhat of an audition for Slugger to, if they throw something like this at him, he plays well. I think that just adds a chip into his cap. Maybe you don't want to, you don't want to unplug. Sue Chung's not going anywhere on that right side of the O line. Tyler Packer's played pretty solid, in my opinion. I don't think you want to mess with things too much, unfortunately, for Slugger, though. We've been advocates here, Blake and I both, of getting him back into the starting lineup. I don't know if he can quite do that when Jarrell comes back, even if he's playing up to a pretty good standard of football at not his natural position, I guess is probably the best way to put it. Maybe he has some familiarity playing tackle, but I would say not his natural position. So will be interesting to see as we continue to look. Woodruff will get the start once again at the left guard position. He got the start last week there when David Neville had to slide out to tackle. Obviously, was kind of curious. Obviously, I believe Woodrum has been on the practice roster all year, but why they didn't maybe look to Andrew Pearson? Maybe it's a kind of been there, done that. You know what to expect from him. They were kind of auditioning. Is it Woodruff a little bit? Yeah, Woodruff. Woodruff. Um, Maybe auditioning Woodruff a little bit to see what he's got, because like I mentioned, I believe he spent a majority of the year on the practice roster. I recognize his face from being around the team a little bit up in training camp and at some home games this year. So know he's been on the sideline. Know he's been with the team for a little bit now, but interesting to see that it wasn't given to Andrew Pearson. I know Slugger, it's been reported from Farhan Lalji, I believe, that Slugger has been healthy enough to play, but for whatever reason, he's been, healthy scratch, kind of on the 6-game injured list as well. So I think it's been a interesting situation the way they've handled Slugger and his injuries, and maybe something we'll find out in the offseason if he decides to maybe walk. I believe it was only a 1-year deal, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on that one, but other than that, the BC Lions are pretty healthy. Defensively, we kind of talked about injuries that we obviously know about. Ryder Vargas still in at the will linebacker spot. TJ Lee coming in to play Sam once again, which has been I think he played pretty well last week. But Roland Kent's going to get the start once again at the field halfback position. Manny Graham will play the boundary with Gary Peters. And Seontae Evans, who I think continues to have a fine season this year, playing that field corner position. And then at safety, the triple threat of Canadians there, starting with Adrian Green. Shout out to AG, playing very well, I think, here in the last few games. And I think maybe not meeting expectations to where they, I think, were coming into the season, but I think he's had himself a solid start to his first full season as a starter in the CFL. Um, Along with Christophe Beaulieu and Charlie Ringland making up the safety room with three Canadians. So other than that, business as usual on defense. Thibaut Dubai looks to be slotting back into the lineup. I know he's been banged up the last few games, and that defensive line is starting to be, starting to turn it on a little bit here, which has been nice to see. We talked about it there on Wednesday night. Last night there was Blake, and mentioned, that very critical of Christian Covington coming into this year, or throughout the year. And I think if the game's starting to slow down for him a little bit, he mentioned there that the game, felt fast. He didn't expect, with the adjustments to come into this league from the NFL, it would take maybe as long as I think nobody probably as expected. But that being said, it seems he's starting to settle in now, which has been a huge factor for the BC Lions, because when he's able to have an impact, I think other guys are be able to free up, get their one-on-one looks, and we've seen that also with Matthew Betts being able to come back in. I think that could also be a key to why we've seen Christian Covington be active in the last few games. A lot more attention probably being paid to Matthew Betts on a weekly basis now, and Christian Covington's allowed to eat and get those one-on-one matchups. Whereas before, if you look at the D lineman room, Pete Robertson's obviously a veteran and a nice piece, but you're probably going to pay all your attention to Christian Covington and allow the tackles to do their job, and then if Pete's kind of wrecking shop, if you will, you have backs to chip and stuff like that out of the backfield. You can go with tight alignments to help as well. So I would imagine most teams on a weekly basis were trying to contain Christian Covington, seeing as that who his name was, the status that he brought, NFL pedigree. And it seems that I think he's starting to, the game slowing down, number one, and he's starting to get some more one-on-one matchups, which is been paying off for him. So defense, like I said, business as usual. Hoping to see hopefully Ben Haladic come back here in a few weeks down the stretch. It would be nice to have him for the last, going into the bye week. I think after that we have 4 games, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So we go bye week. We host Hamilton, host Calgary, at Saskatchewan, host Montreal. So after that, the last 4 games, it'd be nice to have Ben Haladic back in the lineup. I think that would add an even I don't know if I want to say an added I guess what I would say is like the level of play would even get better. I think AC Lee has played well, but I think Ben Haladic is 100 tackles last season. That middle linebacker spot can be a game changer. I don't know if in Ben's case that's kind of where I was about to go, but I don't think we're going to see a night and day difference just because Ben Haladic's back in the lineup. I think he's going to be doing a much better job in some of his run fits. And, ACL's been around the football the last few weeks and not being able to bring some of these balls down and with interceptions. I think Ben Haladic's ball skills are much better than Ace's as well. But like I mentioned, I think Ely's been playing fine in his time filling in. So offensively, I think no other notable changes. Injuries, no other notable changes as well. That receiving core is healthy, which is great. Another small note, which actually perfect timing as he just chimes in here. Blake, how you doing, buddy?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, good.
What's up, buddy? How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. What did I miss?
Not much. So I just went live about 15 or so minutes ago. We discussed, some depth charts, a little bit of injury related stuff. Maybe just give you the quick Coles notes. We talked about obviously Chris Slugger, who's starting in at left tackle now, with Jarrell Broxton on the 6-game injury list. David Neville, I think what I said was I think he played fine there in Touchdown Pacific, kind of came back down to earth there. Slugger, we've obviously been, advocates of him going down to Touchdown Pacific and kind of, somewhat joking of hoping to see him back in the, in the starting lineup. He's going to get that wish now. I was interested to see if that's his, if he's had any experience there. And then defensively, I think no other really notable too many injuries than we've already been accustomed to in with Ben Haladic, The other one I mentioned, I don't believe there was another one. But Ben Hladek, AC Lee obviously has been filling in. So oh, also the other injuries were David Mackey, the short yardage quarterback slash fullback, also forfeits special teamer. I think will be a missed addition tomorrow. The last one I was going to do, which I know you have been paying attention to this the last few weeks, is Stefan Flintoff is the lone punter that will be dressing for this game. Carl Myers, global kicker, is not. I believe he was he in the lineup in Montreal? I don't remember.
He was not.
Okay,
So it was just the touchdown Pacific game.
I'm interested to see. I know you mentioned about the grass versus turf field, and if that had anything to do with it. Other than that, business as usual for the BC Lions. Should be good to go. So Blake, where I'm going to pass this back over to you is I'm going to get your thoughts on our BC Lions offense versus the Argos defense. Just a couple quick thoughts from me before I pass it off to you is, I think this Argos defense, I'm kind of glad we're facing them at this period stretch right now. I think they were playing much better football there to start the year in the little middle part. I think they've had a tough few weeks, I would say, but they still have those pieces. I believe they're without Winton McManus as of now. I
I
know he
believe so.
was battling some injuries, and I know he missed the past few games. Fraser Sopik, Canadian's been a nice addition for them at that. I believe he's playing the Sam linebacker position. But Jake Serezna got off to a hot start, kind of been quiet as of late. So I'm kind of glad we're playing them now instead of when they were obviously we saw them to begin the year and they showed us how good their defense was and we saw. So what are your thoughts for the BC Lions offense against that Toronto Argonauts defense?
Yeah, I'm really excited to see that matchup. The offense has been getting better and better over the last 3 weeks or so. Mainly that's due to the improved play of number 12. Like it's pretty obvious that in almost any football game, when your quarterback is going well, more times than not, the team's going to go well. When the quarterback is not going well, more times than not, it's going to be a struggle for the team. So I think that offense has been playing better. As you mentioned, that Argos defense has not been playing super great lately. They played decent enough after the first quarter in that Riders game where they held the Riders to 9 points in the other 3 quarters. But in the Hamilton game and the Labor Day, they of course lost. They gave up 31 points. And then last week, they gave up 31 points again at halftime, 41 in total. So that defense is kind of regressing, in my opinion. Obviously, with the problems at quarterback that well, not necessarily problems, but with the maybe interception problems, we'll put it that way, that the Argos have had at quarterback. That defense regressing is coming at the absolute worst time for them. And I think the Lions can really take advantage. And Nathan Rourke can probably have his best game so far since he came back.
Yeah, man, I think well said. You mentioned it on the weekly show last night of, we're all I think excited that the Lions are, back, but I feel like they haven't played a full 60 minutes yet, and I think you agree with that and
Yep.
mentioned that as well last night. This could be a game where they, I think, hit on all cylinders. Maybe not. I said it before. They don't ask how, they just ask how many. Right? They don't care about style points. Just get W's in the win column, and hopefully we can track down first place. But when I look at some of these matchups, I think teams are just going to have a tough time dealing with our receiving core and dealing with Nathan Rourke, who we've seen him get comfortable now through the first 3-4 games that he's been back with his quick trigger and where he works and where he's probably best at is in that quick passing game, which teams are going to just have a tough time, stopping because it's I think a lot of preparation on Nathan's part of his pre-snap reads and stuff like that of kind of understanding what the defense might be in and kind of their alignments, how they're lined up on the field and where where there's going to be holes in the defense. So I too am hoping for a pretty close to a perfect game. Obviously, there's no such thing as perfect in pro football. You're going to have some bad plays when there's professionals on the other side of the football. But I think also the biggest key that I think gives you and me hope. You've obviously mentioned it. I don't believe you've done your three keys yet.
Not.
To make things to make things interesting, Blake, because I know we're both going to say it. Number one, I think what helps the BC Lions offense is William Stanback, and we've been big
Yes.
advocates of him for much longer than how well he's been playing for the last month or so of the season. That being said, Blake, what I was going at is I want a new keys to the game. You can't use William Stanback anymore because we've
What?
used
That's
that.
not fair.
And I think we sparked. I think we maybe Jordan Maximic's listening to Blake on the three keys to the game, listening to Blake every week. That being said, for fun purposes this week, I want to get Blake in his bag this week to hear if he can get a new three keys to the game because, folks, we just know already now that William Stanback is a key to this offense. He's going to be a big time factor, whether it's catching the ball out of the backfield, whether it's running the ball. He is going to be a weapon for the BC Lions. And I think if he can stay healthy, we talked about it last night on the weekly show. MOP, like could maybe that be a realistic possibility when you think if the Lions do finish first place, right? They're first place in the West. Obviously, they might not have the best record in the CFL. I think it's fair to say he's probably the most I know it's most outstanding, but he's probably the most valuable player because he's been on the team for all 18 games. Whether it was
Yep.
Vernon Adams at quarterback, whether it was Jake Delagala or Nathan Rourke, he's been the steady cog in the offense that's helped them. Whether it's keep them in manageable down and distance, hitting long, cashing in on long touchdown runs, or catching out of the backfield, which we've kind of seen his uptake or his kind of workload be up with that with playing with Nathan. So I think if he can kind of have we have 5 games remaining with this one, Toronto bye week, and then 4 remaining after that. I think if he can continue to build, which I think he's gonna, and he's gonna get those touches. He had 20 carries last week on top of his receptions. If he can have that every week, 15 to 20, I think is a very good sweet spot that doesn't have to put pressure on. Hell, me and you could play quarterback with a running back like that, getting him in down and distances and stuff. So, all jokes aside, man, I think that is going to be a huge, reason why I think the BC Lions are going to be able to have a good day offensively tomorrow. But Blake, is there any other thoughts? I know I touched on it on the injury report. I am probably interested on seeing about Chris Slugger playing left tackle for the first time. I'd love to maybe ask Nick or Bakes or something like that if he's had any experience playing left tackle in any of his previous stops in the CFL or even in college.
Yeah, no, Farhan was asked that earlier today, so that's a perfect segue. And I believe his last stop was Montreal. Do I have that correct? Yeah, so in Montreal, he was actually a tackle, and then he was somewhat signed as a tackle in BC. And then with some of the other signings, he was moved to guard, and that's, of course, where he started the year. So he has played tackle before. He is somewhat comfortable with the position. The other thing that I'm very interested to see, and I'm sure you saw that I tweeted it from our show account, Twitter, but I'm interested to see what's going to happen with the short yardage now with Mackey hurt. I don't think, um, gosh, I hope not, that they would put Nathan Rourke as the short yardage guy. I don't even think that you'd put VA as the short yardage guy,
So
even
I,
though that's. Sorry, go
I,
ahead.
I think it, I think it's going to be one of them. So that's what also I forgot to mention that you missed out on. So when I mentioned the David Mackey injury, um, so I questioned. So I think it's going to be one of the two because I don't think you can pivot to another guy because we won't trust a fullback.
We
And
are. Pickett's dressing.
Pickett's dressing, okay, who's
Yes.
slash Pickett's not a what would you say, a traditional fullback. I believe he is a well, he got drafted as a defensive lineman, turned long snapper. He got kind of moved to fullback because of is it the Kyle Nelson guy that plays long snapper? He was the
Yeah.
NFL veteran. So he's a Swiss Army knife, and I'm sure he can do it. I don't think he would be a guy that is in contention for short yardage. I think because we saw Nathan Rourke last week cash in on the 18-yard quarterback sneak. We saw him cash in on a 50-yard run, I think, in Ottawa maybe a month ago.
Two
Last year in
years.
Ottawa, he had
Oh
a
yeah, the
50-yard
Ottawa. Yeah, you're right. Sorry.
last year in Ottawa too. He had a 50-yard scamper that was a touchdown. So he has the ability. Now I agree with you. God forbid because injury. Now my reasoning for Vernon Adams, which you might I don't know if you're going to like this or hate this because of the same reasoning, but in a situation where you're in 2nd and 1, say, and you know that you have a 3rd and 1 to fall back on,
Yep.
do you make packages for VA where, you can go with, play action, which we saw in the playoffs from Antonio Pipkin, where he hit Keon Hatcher down the middle of the field for a big play touchdown that kind of turned the tide there in the West semifinal last year? Could you maybe dial something up like that for Vernon Adams? And even if you don't, I think teams have to, be prepared for something like that because they know how good of a passer Vernon Adams is. Maybe that gives them, the extra hesitation on those short yardage plays to, just get the surge they need and push forward. So I'm very interested to see because Vernon Adams is obviously coming back from a knee injury. Do you want him mixing up in the pile and risk, a guy falling on the back of his knee and then you don't have that insurance if Nathan goes down, Nathan starts to play bad, whatever it may be. And Chase Bryce, I don't know if that's a possibility because we haven't really seen him in that role yet. And he's been on the team, he's been dressed. So I too am curious about that, Blake, and I'm really interested to see how they handle it. My best guess, I'm guessing, buddy, is that Rourke is going to do it because they don't want to risk VA. If VA, and of course VA is gonna, the competitor VA is, he's gonna sign off on it and say that he's good to go. So maybe it's a little naive on my part, but I would say like if VA said like I'm good to go, I want to do this, then I would personally lean into Vern Adams because he has a mobility to him that I think is a little bit underrated. And like I mentioned, those 2nd and 1 situations, 2nd and 2s even, where you have that play action threat as well because Vernon Adams is such a lethal passer as well. So I'm very curious, but what do you think? Do you think maybe it could be the quarterbacks, or do you think it could be someone to Pickett or Bryce?
Yeah, no, I thought those were the three options were Riley Pickett, just to be the kind of the exact replacement. I mean, he's listed as a fullback, so the exact replacement for Mackey, VA or Chase Bryce. I like the reasoning that you gave. However, the only thing that would give me pause is something that we also talked about in the weekly show last night, and that was what happened to Chris Streveler. Like that was on a short yardage play. They're expecting him to dive forward. He doesn't. He steps back to pass, and now he's out for the rest of the season at least. Could be longer, as unfortunately with that brutal injury that he suffered. So that's the only thing that would kind of give me pause. However, I do agree with you that if they went to VA and said, "Hey, we need you to do the short yardage," VA would 100% say, "Yeah, I'll do it." Whatever it he's we talked about this when Nathan even signed. He's the ultimate team player, and literally whatever the team needs him to do, that's what he'll do.
Yeah, well said. I'm very interested to see what happens tomorrow night. But I think that kind of concludes our thoughts offensively versus the Toronto Argonauts defensively. So we're gonna go vice versa now. Talk about the BC Lions defense versus that Argos offense. Obviously, you, I, and everybody else in the CFL world are not too big fans of the quarterback on the other team, who we'll leave it unnamed for now. I'm sure everybody knows who we're talking about. That being said, I think this defense is starting to find its rhythm. They're still not perfect, and I think they're going to need to play a tick better down the stretch here. Um, Not even down the stretch, I guess necessarily, but a tick better in playoff games where it's one and done. Not much room for error, and I think is where they can improve here is down the stretch with some of these games. Hamilton, Calgary, Saskatchewan, Montreal in a week. I believe it's 20 game where both teams could possibly be resting players. So I think it's key for them to kind of find their stride here, start to get in rhythm. Obviously, I would imagine there's no bigger critic than the outside. The outside noise has been loud for the BC Lions defense. There is no bigger critic. You and I can attest to this than Ryan Phillips, their own defensive coordinator, who's in that
Yep.
room. I would imagine that meeting room every day, chewing those guys out that they need to play better. Through this kind of rough patch that they had because they started the year. I think they were playing much better football than we're given credit for, and then they hit the obviously the rough 5 game losing streak. Even a few games before the losing streak kind of began, um, they kind of, it wasn't the same defense I guess that we've seen, and maybe it's now, you know, gee, Cole, shocker, Matthew Betts returns, and look what happens. They've started to play good. So I think that's just complimentary football paying off, right, Blake? Because the pass rush is starting to get there a little bit faster. They're not having to cover for so long. So we've seen that kind of like you know the like we were so critical of the defensive backs, right, for not really making plays early on in the season. But if you look back at it too, we weren't really creating a lot of pressure and getting allowing quarterbacks to have all day to throw. I think is a huge disservice for the back end and doesn't help them at all. So we've also dealt with injuries. Josh Woods, Ben Hladek not being available for the majority of the year, I think has been huge. TJ Lee coming back in the middle of the year from a torn Achilles is big. And then new faces in the secondary all over. Outside of Gary Peters, Manny Rugamba, first time in the secondary was playing Sam a majority of last season. Um, Ronald Kent, a first-year BC Lion. Deontay Evans, a first-year BC Lion. Adrian Green, yes, he's been on the team, but a first-year starter, first-year full-time starter, excuse me. So a lot of new pieces. Sonny Tiama being a first-time starter. Christian Covington being a new player to the CFL. How confident are you tomorrow versus the Toronto Argonauts, Blake? And then how confident are you that the Lions defense can kind of find a good enough floor versus their ceiling, which I think their ceiling is pretty up there with any of the defenses in the CFL. But do you think they can have that good enough floor that they can be a CFL contending defense where they can, if the offense has a bad game in the playoffs, which happens, from time
Yep.
to time, right? Can they do enough to get, some stops, turnovers, get their offense some momentum back? What's the confidence level for you tomorrow and long term?
Yeah, no, my confidence level for me tomorrow is pretty good. Like I said, we already talked about it. And the one guy that we did mention on the weekly show last night, but you didn't mention there in that little speech, is Christian Covington. You and I were extremely hard on him for most of the year up until 2, 3 weeks ago. And all of a sudden, in his last 2, 3 games, if you include Touchdown Pacific, I believe he had one in the first game against Ottawa, and I believe he had another one last week. He's had 3 sacks in his last 3 games. He's up to 5 on the year, and he's second in the CFL in sacks, which you're like, 5 sacks? That's second in the CFL. But as you mentioned before, sacks are down all over the CFL. So I think that's a really good sign that Covington is finally maybe adjusted fully to the CFL game. I mean, you and I talked about it at the beginning of the year. Yeah, we expected big things out of him, but at the same time, maybe we shouldn't have, as he hadn't played or Canadian ball, I should say,
Ever.
since like Pop Warner, basically. Like here, high school ball is played in as U.S. rules. He went to college. He played U.S. rules. He went to the NFL and he played U.S. rules, of course, in the NFL. So it was gonna take some time. Maybe we should have given him more of a grace period than we did.
And,
It,
and he was signed late in the offseason as well, Blake, which is
yeah,
something that we,
absolutely.
we, we probably didn't think of as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe we should have given him more of a grace period. It looks like he's adjusted fully. It looks like he's the signing that we expected when we signed him. Of course, you mentioned Matthew Betts coming back. That can do nothing but help. And I really like the way the secondary has played since they revamped it in Touchdown Pacific. Like that during the 5 game losing streak, you heard all the naysayers say, well, why couldn't they revamp the secondary 2, 3 games ago? The fact of the matter is the coaching staff didn't. They did it before Touchdown Pacific. It's working, so they don't need to change it now. Keep it the way it is, and hopefully that defense can keep an upward trajectory, which I think they're on. As I believe, even though Nathan threw 3 interceptions last week, 2 of them which were completely not his fault, they went off the receiver's hands and into Alouettes players' hands. I believe the defense had 2 interceptions of their own, so I believe, in total, the Lions did lose the turnover battle, but they were at least able to keep it close. And the fact that they were able to do that is the reason they were able to win by so much. When maybe they kept well, not maybe, they did. They kept the Alouettes in the game a lot longer than they should have.
Yeah, man. And well said about Christian Covington. I did mention him a little bit earlier when I was talking about injuries. Um, I think he's the scary thing, I think, Blake, is I think I would disagree with you in saying that he's adjusted fully. I think there's another maybe two or three levels that he could adjust even more, man. I think he could become a scary player for us here, hopefully for he said he wanted to come back. He said he wanted to come home. I would imagine, he's kind of, fine with, staying in BC. Obviously there's going to be some moving and shaking this offseason with Nathan's contract, taking over a majority of the salary cap here for the next few years. So I would imagine, as much as we're going to hate it, we're going to probably lose a piece or two that we don't expect or don't want to. I would think Covington's going to want to stick around regardless of how much money is around. Obviously, he's been in the NFL. I think he was just under 10 years, if I'm not mistaken, in the NFL.
I believe he has a
So I would
lifetime
think,
pension.
yeah, lifetime pension. Would think money's not no issue. I think he's pretty smart with his money and didn't blow it all. Not a guy that was highly paid. Wasn't a top 20, 35, 25, 30 highest paid, defensive tackles. That being said, we're talking about, he was still being paid millions of dollars to play football.
Hmm.
So I would think he, invested and whatnot and probably able to get, generate some more money out of that with his name and stuff like that, likeness, all that sort of stuff. So I would imagine he's not, pressed for money and very, ticked off if the Lions went to him and said, hey, we need to, make a little bit of a deal here. You're able to get us, some money back here and shake things around. If he can be like, if he can be even more dominant next year, Blake, I think that is Matthew Betts is obviously on a 1 year deal, and that's going to be a big time decision, which I think he could be probably target number one who we might lose because
Hmm.
I don't see, unless Amar Doman is like, which he might. I just don't know how you can kind of keep a Matthew Betts who's going to be look, he's the very opposite of Christian Covington, right? Where he's a first round pick in the CFL, but he is a, has he even made like, I would imagine his contracts with Edmonton, and was it Edmonton who drafted him?
I believe so.
Yeah, Edmonton, and then he came to BC. That first one probably weren't, anything more than, 800K combined. I would think. Like I would imagine, I would kind
Yep.
of wonder if he's even made $1 million total in the CFL contracts, because his rookie deals were probably 100K maybe each season. The year he came to BC, he was coming off 0 sack season. I don't think BC paid him more than 90, 100K, something like that. Once again, probably a rookie, similar to a rookie contract. He obviously blows up and tries to rightfully so go to the NFL and never really hit his payday yet in the CFL in terms of being a big time contract player. Does he want to go home? Does he want to go back to Montreal? And with
Montreal.
Montreal being a good team, Montreal not really paying anybody too crazy. Cody's paid, but he's not. I don't think he's a top three quarterback in terms of contract.
Tyson's another one.
Tyson, I guess, will be up. Is he a free? Is he like
After
he'll
this year.
he'll sign back in Montreal without a doubt, but I would imagine he'll probably be a guy that's he'll get a nice pay raise. I would think Tyson. Now, will it be as nice as if he stayed healthy? That was the guy that I gave a shout out, Blake. That was something you missed as well when we were talking about injuries. Absolutely gutted for that kid, man. He was on a tear, and obviously BC boy, Vancouver boy. Really rooting for him, regardless of who he plays for. Same with his brother Jalen. Big fans of both of them, as are you, and
Yep.
just gutted for him because I think he was on pace to. I don't know if I can get on the MOP candidate train, but I think
I
he was
think
well
he
on
was
pace.
close.
He was. I agree with how 2020 vision it is now. I don't think it's as a hot take as the start of the season. But most outstanding Canadian, I think he had that
Oh yeah.
unlocked until he got hurt. Because he was as great as Justin McInnes was doing, folks. He was maybe
Better.
200 yards. Yeah, he was 200 yards. I think past him majority of those weeks. So got it for that kid. I think he'll be an interesting one to see how much he gets paid because Matthew Betts, man, that'll be interesting. That defense of Matthew Betts, oh my goodness, man. The rich would get richer, and they do not need to do that. Obviously, they just paid Austin Mack as well, so maybe that's where they could potentially be handcuffed with some receiver money. They have to play. I would imagine KGG is like kind of like a guy where he's like a Nick Dempsey, I think, where he's a good player, but he won't command like top tier CFL salary cap money. So be interesting to see where Matthew Betts goes. But if they can lock up Matthew Betts, Christian Covington along that defensive line, Blake, we'll have the best 1-2 punch, in the league. But the luxury of that, Blake, is for the ratio purposes, two Canadians, man, which
Yep.
would be absolutely massive in terms of ratio, building around them with some imports, some Americans. Hopefully, you're able to kind of do a little bit better job in your scouting of those guys, because I think we've done such a good job of scouting the Canadians. It's time to hit on some Americans and try to bring them up with some of these core guys that are sticking around. So, Blake, defensively, you're confident. I am as well. I don't believe you answered, or you did actually answer that you think that they can kind of find their stride here down the stretch and
Yeah,
be. I don't want to say like a top tier, but like good enough. Like I was talking about with the offense
yeah,
doesn't play a good
exactly.
game, they can do their job. They can hold their own. They don't oh, the offense punted and boom, they're in the end zone. 3 plays later, I think they can get a 2 and out their own and generate momentum back for their offense. So um, other than that, buddy, it's 5 o'clock. Any final thoughts, special teams wise? We talked about it last night. Sean White missed. We talked about it last night. We talk about it every week. Missed automatic. Not much to be worried about there. In BC Place, no conditions. Stefan Flintoff has been obviously his holder for his entire time back with the
Yeah,
BC
as
Lions.
long as he doesn't hit the scoreboard again.
If um and Nielsen, same snap, hold, and kick with the operations team. Flintoff's been fine with punting. I know he had a little bit of
Yeah.
ups and downs, but that's going to happen through it along. I try to tell everybody I do a better job with with my Buffalo Bills more so than anything, but stay off the roller coaster of a long season, folks, because it is number one. It's not good for the mentals. It'll stress you the heck out because I'm learning that with the BC Lions because I'm not as good of kind of that, but it's just ups and downs, peaks and valleys, man. Having played the game, like I played a 10 week, season where like I couldn't imagine an 18 game season. Where in a 10 game season, you're gonna have 2, 3 bad games a year, right? Where you just for whatever reason you don't show up, and does that mean you're a bad team? No. Does that mean you're a bad team that day? Yes. But you know, look at it from a more like a 2020 view, right? From a bird's eye
Hmm.
view, where look at the body of work more so than just one game. Obviously, we're in the business of media and talking about things, so is it better and does it generate more conversation to kind of react a little bit? Of course. Where is it it's probably more boring to, say, "Oh, don't worry about it, the BC is going to be fine, this out of that." I think it's no coincidental that one of our biggest like BC Lions videos this year is the is it time to panic for the BC Lions, where it's like the catchy kind of like draw you in with the thumbnail, which I'm not surprised most YouTubers say that, but we didn't really panic. Like we were panicking in a sense, like we weren't thrilled that we were losing, but like I don't think you or I were really panicking. If you go back and listen to that show, like we weren't, I guess kind of somewhat we were. I was gonna say we weren't like calling for people's jobs, but we kind of somewhat were some
We
weeks.
kind of did.
Um, but like do you know what I'm saying though? Like we weren't
Yeah, no,
panicking
I
like in
get it.
terms of like a 911 emergency. We were panicking in terms of like we're not used to this. Like what is going on? We're a much better team than this. Like more so than like lose everything. Like this has got to go. Blah 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 blah. But other than that, buddy, I'm super excited. I'm super bummed that I'm not going to be in attendance with you. But what are you looking forward to be back? I mentioned that at the start of the show. It has been 6 of the past 7 games that the Lions haven't been in BC Place. Touchdown Pacific being in there as well. How excited are you to be back in BC Place tomorrow and just be in that audience with your season ticket holders in your usual section? I would imagine I'll probably see you on TV, knowing you. But how excited are you to be back in BC?
Yeah, no, it's definitely very exciting, and it starts a stretch of at least for the next five to finish the regular season, as my dog tries to take over the show here. But for the next five to end the regular season at BC Place, and then hopefully at least two playoff games. I'll put that out in the air right now. Hopefully, the Western Final at
Only gonna need
BC.
one, baby.
Yeah, but I was gonna say the Western Final at BC Place, and then the Grey Cup.
Yeah,
So
fair,
hopefully,
fair. So two.
so
You're
so
right.
hopefully two. That'll make it six of the last seven, and it should be a good game. We'll see. Hopefully, Mister Number 12 doesn't have a good game, and the Lions can get another win and put themselves in first place at the end of the week. as with the Bombers on bye, if they're able to win tomorrow, they would jump ahead of the Bombers for at least 1 week.
Yeah, man. I forgot that the Bombers are on a bye, and I mentioned the schedule, Blake. Obviously, the lines will be on a bye the following week, allowing Winnipeg to hop in front of them. But without looking at Winnipeg's schedule right now, man, bye week versus Hamilton, versus Calgary, at Saskatchewan, versus Montreal. I'm not hating that schedule down the stretch. I don't put it past including Toronto. Winning out's a possibility,
I
a
agree.
very real, very real possibility. Toronto's going to be the hardest matchup, I think, depending on Saskatchewan, obviously, but
I think
Saskatchewan,
that week 20 game against Montreal, they'll be sitting a lot of starters.
Montreal, or you think us?
Yeah, like Montreal will be sitting a lot of
I,
starters.
I agree. That's why I think it's a very winnable game instead of if they were playing the starters. Um, Toronto's going to be the hardest one to get. I want to know if Blake's phone just died. To be honest, I really think that his phone just died, and I would love that if that's what happened. But he'll join if it didn't here in a second, which would be hilarious. Damn, I was so wishing your phone died, just because of
No.
like how like that. That's I don't think that's ever happened to us, but that'd be hilarious if like ending the show and your phone died. But um, we get past Toronto. I'm not gonna count out Saskatchewan, but Saskatchewan's one push away from falling off the goddamn cliff. Let's be real. Like they're literally one push away from falling off the cliff here.
Yep.
Like very realistic that they lose a game here and they kind of tuck tail the rest of the year and kind of aren't the same team. They're a good team. So would I be shocked that they snap out of this and contend for that second, third place spot, even first? No. But like I said, they're one push away from falling off that cliff. If we can get Toronto bye week, we're going to get rusted up. I would imagine Ben Haladic will be back. Uh, 50-50 whether Jarrell Broxton will be back. We'll start to get healthy for that remaining month stretch of the season. Hamilton, we're going to mollywop Hamilton. Calgary, it might be the same. We might mollywop them 2 weeks in a row. Saskatchewan at Saskatchewan's tough because we're going to Saskatchewan, and at that time, if they are winning some games, they're going to be a desperate bunch where they know that they can't drop one to us. So it's
Yeah.
going to be either, Saskatchewan's either out by that point, and they're, they've lost, what at that point it'll be like 7 of 9 or something crazy like that, or it'll be like they've won 3 straight and they're riding high and they're one game behind us. So um, get Toronto, man, get into the bye week, and we'll be healthy. We said it last night on the show to end things. The BC Lions are back, and you're gonna have to deal with them. So I'm super excited, man. As I'm sure you guys can tell here. But Blake, it's freaking game time, buddy. I'm even more excited. Maybe that's why I'm
It
jacked,
is.
actually, probably because the Buffalo Bills are about to play. I had to wear my Josh Allen shirt
I
after
need
Coach.
a big game from Josh Allen. Like
You got
I
him on
can't.
fantasy.
Yeah, he's my quarterback,
That
so
a
I
boy,
need a
Blake.
big game from him.
He got you. He owns the Miami Dolphins. Although I would say if there is a game that I want to drop versus a divisional opponent, it's September way rather than the. I think we play them in November if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So I'd way rather win that game at home. That being said, Bills by a billion. I'm super excited. I wore the Josh Allen shirt because Coach was talking ish on my man's last night, and I've let it fly. I really don't pay attention to it, but this year I'm just having none of it, man, because a lot of people were disrespecting him. That being said, this is a CFL/BC Lions show. So enough of that. Blake, I think that'll do it for tonight, buddy. Like, comment, subscribe as always. Smash the subscribe button. I was telling the people a little bit ambitious goal, but let's hopefully get to 1,000 followers on Instagram by the end of the weekend. Big action
Let's
for
do it.
CFL this weekend. I think we're like less than 15. Would be super, super cool. I just saw we had a subscriber during the show, so we're at 251 subscribers now. So the
Yep.
road to 300, is that what we're trying to do for Grey Cup? 300 by
Yep.
Grey Cup?
300.
300 by Grey Cup. That's plenty of time, plenty of shows. So enjoy the weekend, everybody. Enjoy Thursday night football. Enjoy CFL. Most importantly, enjoy the BC Lions tomorrow night. Remember, there's some Canada West CGFL on as well, so don't
High
consume
school as
all.
always.
High school as always as well. As much as I'm enjoying, watching NFL, as much as I'm enjoying tuning into NCAA, remember that we have a great product of our own up here in Canada, and that is why we are the Canadian Football Fanatics, because we are here to tell you all about it. So, Blake, enjoy the rest of the night, buddy, and I will see you tomorrow for a post game show.
Sounds good.
Later, everybody, and we'll catch you guys next Wednesday night.